Well, as you know, Amy, John Karl has been running around the country, and instead of bringing back souvenirs, he's been bringing back tasty interviews. He stopped in Delaware last week, and he had a great conversation with both Christine O'Donnell and Mike Castle. Here's a look at the two combatants in tomorrow's hot Delaware primary.
So, Congressman, thank you for joining us here at Jake's Burgers.
Sure.
Good to be here in Delaware.
Good place to be.
So how does it look?
It looks fine. It's this has not been an easy election cycle. Going through a difficult primary and then into a general election is not an easy circumstance. But having said that, the polling looks fine, and I feel comfortable with that.
So what happens if Christine O'Donnell wins this race?
That's just a conjecture. I haven't even really tried to think out. I couldn't even answer what her chances would be to win it if she were to win the nomination. I don't think it's very likely, and that's one of the reasons I haven't thought about it. But nothing's impossible. I mean, we all know that.
Did you learn a lesson watching Lisa Murkowski go down in Alaska?
I guess it was sort of like icing on the cake. The cake was already baking. I watched it in a few other races as well. And then, of course, Lisa went down. That was discouraging. She's a very respected senator. I've had a couple of Democratic senators tell me how much respect they had for her. I actually spoke to her. She called me, several days after she went down and said, these people will come hard. Just be, very careful.
Did she give you advice on how?
Yeah, just general advice. Be careful, prepare yourself, and go for it.
And don't do what she did, which is hold back.
Exactly.
And not,
Yeah.
Coast.
And she had the further problem of Sarah Palin being from Alaska and going in and campaigning against her. I mean, Sarah Palin may have endorsed my opponent, but she's not from Delaware, and it's a different circumstance.
What was going on with that, though? Why did Sarah Palin come out and endorse your opponent?
I have no idea. I've never ever spoken to Sarah Palin. I assume that she's probably got some tie-in with the Tea Party Express people or something of that nature. I just don't know. I have no idea.
You did an interview with Stephen Colbert, which he recently rebroadcast. Very entertaining interview. Did you have any? Why did you do it, first of all? And did you know what you were getting into?
You're asking the wrong person. I've got some staff people here. Ask them. They kept saying you ought to do this. I said, I'm not going to do that. I mean, he's much cleverer than I am and much funnier, and it would just be an embarrassment. And then one day they said he's coming to Washington because they wanted me to go to New York. And they said, you got to do it. And I said, all right, I'll do it. And I remember meeting him in the hall of the Cannon office building. He was on a skateboard, and he came down, held out his hand, and Stephen Colbert went by. And then we did it, and it went on for about an hour and a half or 2 hours of interview. And of course, they used 7 minutes of it.
2 hours of interview?
Oh, yeah, and I said, no, this is just going to be a disaster.
Christine O'Donnell, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate your time. Now, big news. You've just been endorsed by Sarah Palin. Did you see it coming? Did you know? When did you know she was going to endorse your campaign?
Well, I was at a diner. It was really just the best place I could be. I was at a locally owned diner talking to the Delaware voters. I was chatting with this one couple who was just encouraging me, letting me know they were frustrated with the establishment. And I got a text, and I went, oh, wait a minute.
A text.
Sarah Palin just endorsed me. And then the table that I was just talking to, the table behind me heard it, and then the whole diner, erupted in applause.
Who'd the text come from? Was it actually
someone from my staff?
From your staff telling you about it.
So I went, hey, Sarah Palin just endorsed me, and all the other people who were at the restaurant started clapping.
What about the stuff about them kind of to a extent harassing you? I mean, in the bushes at your house, or what was that all about?
I mean, that's a shame. That even shouldn't be part of this conversation because. Again, my opponent is desperate, and they're tracking, but that's to be expected in highly competitive.
What have they done to you?
We have all that on our website. Those kind of tactics are expected to be part of a campaign.
You know what Republicans are saying now. They're saying that if you win, this seat goes to the Democrats. There's just no way you can win, and they've found exactly the candidate that can win. And proven he can win statewide in Delaware, and that you're messing everything up for the Republicans.
It's a shame because that candidate votes with the Democrats more often than the Republicans. So but there's a tidal wave coming here in Delaware, and my campaign is riding it. My opponent is drowning in it, so he's doing any last-ditch effort to try to stay afloat.
And we'll see who gets wet tomorrow. We see Christine O'Donnell there making that case, and as we've seen a number of Tea Party candidates saying to Republicans, essentially, look, stick with your principles here rather than going with what you might be the easier choice.
Well, and the really hard thing, too, for Mike Castle is he is a very moderate Republican. It's actually quite surprising that it took this long for conservatives to rally around one of his opponents. I mean, in some of these other cases, the Bob Bennett in Utah, we can argue that you're really splitting hairs about who's the more conservative. In this case, they really should have done this earlier. They just didn't have the vehicle, and now they're trying to turn Christine O'Donnell into a credible conservative alternative. So we'll see if that works out. And New Hampshire will be very interesting, too.
And, of course, the other big thing is Republicans hate her. The Republican Party, they're trying to kill her candidacy if they can at all, if it's at all possible. That does it for this edition of Top Line. It's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/Amy E. Walter. And, John, you better have more than just interviews. Saltwater taffy, anything from Delaware?